Everyone talks about Florida real estate like it's about taxes, weather, and migration, and sure, those matter, but nobody's telling you the real story. The one written in limestone 25 million years ago, the one that explains why Tampa homes cost half what Miami does, why your insurance company just fled the state, and why that affordable beach condo might be the worst investment of your life. Florida's geography isn't trivia. It's the invisible hand controlling every market in the state, and most buyers have no idea they're gambling against physics itself. Here's what I mean. Florida is the only state where water doesn't just come from above. It bubbles up from below through porous rock you're building million-dollar homes on. It's the only state bordered by two completely different oceans, creating a 40% price gap nobody talks about. It's the flattest state in America, which sounds boring until you realize that's why storm surge from a hurricane 30 miles offshore floods your house 15 miles inland. And the big one? The thing the real estate industry will never put in a listing. Florida's billion-dollar coastal developments are built on a geological impossibility. You can't seawall your way out of this one because the ocean doesn't need to come over the wall. It just comes up through the ground. We're looking at 10 geography facts that explain everything from why your homeowner's insurance doubled to why that Panhandle beach house sits unsold at half the price of the Gulf Coast, to why North Central Florida might be the smartest long-term play nobody's making. If you want to understand Florida real estate, you don't start with Zillow, you start with a geology textbook. Let's go. Fact number 1. Florida sits on 25 million years of dead sea creatures. Florida's entire foundation is compressed prehistoric ocean life. Billions of shells, coral skeletons, and sea creature remains fused into limestone over 25 million years. The whole state was underwater back then, and that ancient seafloor is what you're building on today. Construction crews regularly uncover whale bones the size of cars and shark teeth bigger than your hand. That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that this limestone is porous, full of holes like Swiss cheese, which means water moves through it freely. Your foundation isn't sitting on solid rock, it's sitting on a sponge. Here's the real estate reality. Foundation inspections in Florida aren't optional, they're survival. That porous limestone dissolves when groundwater flows through it, creating underground voids that can collapse without warning. Picture this. You close on your dream home in June, foundation report clean. By September, there's a 6-inch crack running through your living room floor because an underground void the size of a swimming pool just collapsed beneath your slab. Welcome to building on a fossil graveyard. Zillow shows you median home prices at $410,000 in Tampa. What it doesn't show you is the $8,000 to $15,000 you'll spend on foundation inspections, soil testing, and sinkhole insurance before you even close. The geology shapes the market in ways most buyers never see coming until they're writing checks they didn't budget for. Fact number 2. Florida is America's lightning capital. Florida doesn't just get lightning storms. It dominates the category with 76 lightning flashes per square kilometer annually, the highest density in the United States. The I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando is a global lightning hotspot, and if you've never experienced a Central Florida summer thunderstorm, you have no idea what's coming. Every summer afternoon around 3 p.m., Central Florida becomes a war zone. 2 sea breezes, one from the Gulf, one from the Atlantic, march inland like opposing armies and collide directly over the I-4 corridor. The result is towering thunderheads that look like nuclear explosions and electrical storms so intense your car alarm goes off in the driveway. It's spectacular until your $6,000 HVAC system gets fried for the 3rd time in 2 years. Here's what this means for homeowners. Surge protectors aren't optional upgrades in Florida. They're standard lease requirements. HVAC systems, water heaters, appliances, and electronics get fried regularly. A local HVAC tech told us off the record, "We don't ask if lightning killed your AC unit. We ask when it happened and how many times you've replaced it." Insurance companies know this, which is why Florida homeowners insurance runs 2 to 3 times the national average even before you factor in hurricane coverage. When you're comparing that $340,000 Orlando home to a similar property in North Carolina, the sticker price looks competitive. The annual insurance premium of $4,200 versus $1,400 changes the math completely. Lightning doesn't just create dramatic skies in Florida. It creates hidden carrying costs that turn affordable markets into expensive ones real fast. Your monthly payment looks fine until you realize you're paying an extra $230 per month just to protect against electrical storms that happen 100 plus days per year. Fact number 3, Florida is the only state bordered by 2 different oceans. Florida has coastline on both the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, making it the only state with this dual coast geography. And those 2 coastlines create completely different beach experiences and completely different real estate markets that most buyers don't understand. The Gulf side has tiny tidal changes, barely moving 3 feet between high and low tide. This creates calm, lake-like conditions perfect for families and sandbars that stretch forever. The Atlantic side has tidal swings up to 6 feet, building steeper beaches with bigger waves and higher energy surf. Different geology, different vibe, different buyer pool. Here's the market reality nobody talks about. Gulf Coast beach homes sell for 30% to 40% less than comparable Atlantic coast properties. A 3-bedroom condo in Clearwater Beach runs $425,000. The same unit in Fort Lauderdale, $650,000. Same state, same beach access, same sunshine, but the Atlantic commands a premium Gulf buyers never pay. Why? Perception and proximity. The Atlantic side faces Europe and feels more connected, while the Gulf side faces nothing but water for 500 miles. The Atlantic gets Miami's cultural spillover and international flight connections. The Gulf gets called Florida's quiet side, which is realtor code for nobody knows you're here. Remember that porous limestone from fact number 1? Both coasts are built on it. Both coasts face hurricanes. Both coasts get the same sunshine, but one coast decided it's worth $225,000 more because it faces the right direction. That's not real estate, that's psychology. If you want beach access and don't care about status signaling, the Gulf Coast is a geographic arbitrage play hiding in plain sight. Same sunshine, half the price, all because of which ocean you're facing. Fact number 4, Tampa Bay sits in Sinkhole Alley. Florida has more sinkholes than any other state, and West Central Florida around Tampa Bay experiences the highest sinkhole activity in the country. The area earned the nickname Sinkhole Alley because porous limestone beneath the surface dissolves constantly, creating underground cavities that collapse without warning. These aren't small divots in your lawn. We're talking about events that swallow houses, cars, swimming pools, and entire buildings within hours. In 2013, a sinkhole in Sefner opened up beneath a bedroom and swallowed a man while he slept. His body was never recovered. The house was condemned and demolished. Sinkholes form when slightly acidic groundwater dissolves limestone bedrock over time, creating hollow spaces underground. When these cavities grow large enough, the surface collapses suddenly. Florida's geology makes this process constant and unpredictable, with new sinkholes forming regularly across Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas counties. Here's the real estate impact. Hillsborough County has a strong job market, growing population, and solid fundamentals. But homes sit on market longer and sell for less than comparable properties in adjacent counties because buyers fear sinkholes. A 4-bedroom house in Tampa lists for $380,000 and sits for 67 days. The same house in Sarasota, just 1 county south, outside Sinkhole Alley, lists for $435,000 and goes under contract in 34 days. Your neighbor's sinkhole doesn't just destroy their property value, it craters yours too. And unlike the stock market, you can't diversify away from geology. Geographic lottery at its finest, and the odds are written in limestone. Fact number 5. Florida is America's flattest state. Scientists proved mathematically that Florida is flatter than a pancake. The highest point in the entire state is Britton Hill at 345 feet above sea level. That's barely taller than a 30-story building. You could stack 15 Britton Hills and still not reach Denver's elevation. This isn't just a fun fact for geography nerds. This flatness has massive implications for how water moves across the landscape. Rivers barely know which direction to flow because there's almost no elevation change to guide them. The St. Johns River drops only 30 feet over 310 miles, creating a lazy waterway that breathes with Atlantic tides. Here's what flat terrain means in practice. During Hurricane Ian in 2022, storm surge pushed 15 miles inland from Fort Myers Beach. Homes in Lehigh Acres, nowhere near the coast, had 4 feet of salt water in their living rooms. Families who thought we're 12 miles inland, we're safe, watched the ocean flow across flat geography like it was a parking lot. When the entire state is barely above sea level. There is no high ground. Flood insurance zones in Florida make no sense to outsiders until you understand the topography. A house 12 miles from the coast still requires flood insurance because when the ocean rises 12 feet during a storm, that water has nowhere to go but horizontally across the flat landscape. Properties in Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Fort Myers that seem safely inland flood regularly during major hurricanes. When you're house hunting in Florida and the seller mentions never flooded, check the elevation maps, not just the distance from shore. Flat geography turns the entire state into a potential flood zone, and Hurricane Ian just gave everyone a $113 billion lesson in what that actually means. Fact number 6. Florida has 2 time zones. Florida is split between Eastern Time covering most of the state and Central Time in the Western Panhandle. The time zone boundary roughly follows the Apalachicola River, creating a situation where you can drive from one time zone to another without leaving Florida. The Panhandle stretches almost to Mobile Bay, and culturally it feels more deep south than subtropical peninsula. You've got longleaf pine forests, rivers lined with cypress trees, and seafood towns that reflect the region's distinct character. The landscapes and vibe are different from the rest of Florida. It's not palm trees and theme parks up here. Here's the real estate angle nobody discusses. Panhandle beach towns like Panama City Beach, Destin, and Pensacola offer Gulf Coast access at prices 40% to 50% lower than comparable markets just a few hours south. A 3-bedroom beach condo in Destin runs $385,000. The same unit in Naples, $675,000. Why the discount? Perception. The Panhandle operates on Central Time, which subconsciously registers as not really Florida to buyers from the Northeast. They're looking for Eastern Time Zone properties that feel connected to the Miami-Orlando-Tampa corridor. The Panhandle gets dismissed as too far, too different, or basically Alabama. Think about that for a second. You can buy the same white sand beaches, the same emerald Gulf water, the same 350 days of sunshine, but because your clock is 1 hour different, the market gives you a 50% discount. That's not a rational market. That's proof that real estate runs on vibes and FOMO, not fundamentals. If you want white sand beaches, emerald water, and Gulf Coast sunsets without paying Naples or Sarasota prices, the time zone creates geographic arbitrage. Same sunshine, same coastline, different clock, and apparently that's worth a $290,000 discount. Fact number 7. Florida has 1,000 plus freshwater springs fed by a massive aquifer. Florida has more freshwater springs than anywhere else on Earth. Over 1,000 springs bubbling crystal clear water at a constant 72 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. These springs aren't just scenic swimming holes, they're windows into the Florida aquifer, one of the world's most productive underground water supplies. This massive freshwater system beneath the state supplies drinking water for nearly 10 million people across multiple states. It's constantly refilled by rainfall soaking through Florida's porous limestone over thousands of years. Springs like Wakula, Ichetucknee, and Silver Springs produce billions of gallons of fresh water daily, feeding rivers and maintaining ecosystems found nowhere else on Earth. Here's the long-term real estate play nobody's making yet. North Central Florida, the Gainesville Corridor, Marion County, areas around these major springs has water security that South Florida can only dream about. While Miami-Dade is literally pumping salt water out of their drinking supply, and Broward County is watching the ocean seep into their aquifer like a slow-motion apocalypse, these spring-fed regions sit on an underground ocean that never runs dry. Miami-Dade's Biscayne aquifer is already compromised. Saltwater intrusion isn't a future problem, it's happening now. The county spends millions annually on desalination and treatment trying to keep pace with demand. When South Florida runs out of fresh water, not if, when, these boring inland spring towns suddenly become the most valuable real estate in the state. But right now, you can buy in for $285,000 in Ocala or $310,000 in Gainesville because nobody wants to live somewhere without a beach. These markets get dismissed as college towns or middle of nowhere by coastal buyers chasing ocean views. 20 years from now, when coastal Florida is rationing water and north central Florida is turning on the tap without thinking twice, those spring-fed regions will look like the smartest geographic bet anyone could have made. Nobody's pricing water security into Florida real estate yet. The springs tell you where the safe long-term value is hiding. Fact number 8. Florida has been hit by 120 hurricanes since 1851. Of the roughly 300 hurricanes that have struck the United States since 1851, 120 have hit Florida's coast. That's 40% of all hurricane strikes concentrated in one state. Florida's location between the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico makes it a natural bullseye for tropical systems, with over 1,350 miles of coastline exposed on both sides. The state's hurricane season runs from June through November, with peak activity in August and September. Florida's long hurricane history shows up in building codes requiring impact glass, storm shutters, and reinforcement straps. These aren't optional upgrades. They're survival requirements written into law after decades of catastrophic storms. Here's the insurance reality that's reshaping Florida's coastal markets. Major carriers are fleeing the state entirely. In 2023 alone, 7 major insurers either left Florida completely or stopped accepting new policies. State Farm, Farmers, Allstate, they've all either stopped writing new policies or dramatically reduced coverage in Florida. The state-run Citizens Property Insurance went from emergency backup to covering 1.2 million policies, more than any private insurer. When the government becomes your insurance company, that's not a functioning market, that's a bailout waiting to collapse. When you're looking at that affordable $450,000 beachfront condo in Fort Myers, the insurance quote will be $8,500 to $12,000 annually, if you can even get coverage. Some coastal properties are becoming uninsurable at any price, which means unmortgageable, which means unsellable, except to cash buyers willing to self-insure. Hurricane geography isn't just about storm prep anymore. It's about whether the insurance market can sustain coastal development at all. Those bargain beach listings might be bargains for a reason. Nobody can afford to own them long term. Fact number 9. For the first time ever, Florida's coastal exodus has begun. Here's something that would have been impossible to say 5 years ago. For the first time since the 1970s, Florida's inland counties are growing faster than coastal ones. The Great Florida Coastal Migration is reversing, and most people haven't noticed yet. Roughly 70% of Florida's 22 million residents still live within 10 miles of the coastline, creating some of the most densely populated coastal regions in America. That concentration runs from Miami and Fort Lauderdale up through Tampa Bay and Jacksonville, following the shoreline where ocean views and waterfront access have drawn millions for decades. But the 2020 census data shows something unprecedented. Counties like Polk, Sumter, and Lake, all inland, all nowhere by traditional Florida standards, posted population growth rates that outpaced coastal darlings like Palm Beach and Collier. People aren't just visiting inland Florida anymore. They're moving there permanently. Why? Insurance costs, flood risk, and hurricane fatigue are driving the first reverse migration in Florida history. When your annual insurance premium jumps from $3,200 to $9,800 in 2 years, and your neighborhood floods twice in 5 years, the beach view loses its appeal. Suddenly, that 4-bedroom house in Ocala for $285,000 starts looking smarter than the coastal condo in Volusia County for $465,000. This is the early stage of a massive geographic revaluation. Coastal Florida still commands premium prices because the psychology hasn't caught up to the reality yet, but the smart money is already moving inland, and in 10 years, everyone will pretend they saw it coming. Right now, you can still buy inland Florida for a discount because the market is slow to price in existential risk. That window is closing. Fact number 10. Florida's porous limestone means seawalls can't stop rising seas. Here's the big one, the fact that changes everything about Florida's coastal real estate. The state is built on porous limestone, which means rising sea levels don't just come over seawalls, they come up through the ground itself. Florida is the flattest state in America with extensive low-lying coastal areas. Miami sits atop the Biscayne Aquifer, where salt water can bubble up through porous limestone during high tides, a phenomenon called sunny day flooding that happens even when there's no storm. You can build all the seawalls you want. The ocean doesn't need permission to go over them when it can just seep through the foundation. Many Florida communities already experience increased flooding during king tides. Miami Beach has spent over $500 million on pumps, raised roads, and drainage systems trying to manage water that rises from below. It's not working long term because you can't pump faster than geology. Here's the existential real estate question. What happens to property values when buyers realize 30-year mortgages are a bet against physics? Miami luxury condos are already selling at discounts. Waterfront properties in Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Naples are seeing longer days on market as institutional investors quietly exit coastal positions. Billions in real estate value are built on a geological impossibility. You cannot seawall your way out of porous bedrock. The industry won't tell you this because the entire coastal development model collapses the moment people start asking, what's this worth in 2045? Florida's geography gave us paradise. Now it's taking it back, and most buyers are still pretending the ground beneath them is solid. So there you have it, 10 geography facts that explain more about Florida real estate than any market report ever will. The lightning creates insurance costs nobody budgets for. The dual coastlines create price arbitrage nobody exploits. The sinkholes create risk nobody can predict. And the porous limestone creates a long-term crisis nobody wants to acknowledge. This isn't doom and gloom, it's geology. And geology doesn't care about your investment thesis. The smartest play might be the one nobody's making. North Central Florida spring country, where water security, elevation, and distance from hurricane-prone coasts create long-term value the market hasn't priced in yet. Or maybe it's accepting that Florida coastal real estate is a 10 to 15 year trade, not a generational hold. Either way, you can't understand the market until you understand the ground it's built on. And in Florida, that ground is a 25 million year old sponge with water rising through it. The limestone doesn't care about your investment timeline. The ocean doesn't care about your equity position. And the insurance companies already know what's coming. That's why they left. If this changed how you see Florida, hit subscribe. Drop a comment with which fact you're still thinking about. Thanks for watching.